I'm a program manager at Microsoft. So Microsoft program management, product management is a very similar concept. We just call ourselves program manager. I've been at the company for nearly 15 years. I'll be, I think, 1 year shy of 15. I started my career in 2005 with Bomber, and actually Gates was still around at that point, and focused on web standards. So at that time, Chrome had just come out, and I was in college at the University of Pennsylvania, and got a call from Microsoft saying, hey, do you want to help work in IE? We're going to try to compete with Chrome. And I said, wow, this is like the browser wars, right? This is going to be a great time to join. And I quickly found myself ending up serving in the W3C, which is the World Web Consortium, on certain web standards. A lot of these web standards are responsible for the internet as we know it today. For example, have any of you heard of the HTML5 spec? So I'm one of the original co-authors of the HTML5 spec. As well as a bunch of very, very kind of deep technical specifications. After that, I moved on to digital marketing, where I worked in the data and analytics team, building marketing, segmentation, tools, online marketing, user research. That was a really hot space, and it was a lot of fun getting to learn from a product management perspective how marketers think, how do we go about generating leads, acquiring customers, driving up engagement. After that, I moved on to IoT, Internet of Things. That was probably one of the most fun things I've done. IoT is a wild west of technology. All these little devices, smart homes, gadgets, sensors, cameras, 3D goggles, all of these things are taking over our work, right? Smart locks. And they all need to work together. But it's very difficult to make all these different devices work together because it's so early in the technology development cycle that different companies are trying to create their own ecosystem. So where they want everything to work with their ecosystem. So what that is that's really bad, because what ends up happening is that for IoT to really work, things should work across everything, just like web standards. So I worked on that, and I architected the merger between two of the largest groups, standards bodies in IoT, the Open Connectivity Foundation and the All-Join Alliance. When I was working in IoT, one of the things I realized is, there is a trend towards taking consumer-grade devices, IoT devices, sensors, cameras, and starting to use them in factory floors. Not many years ago, even 5, 10 years ago, and today, most devices in factory floor are these very expensive cameras. They're not the stuff that you use at home. The water sensors are much more robust, much more expensive. That's changing. Factory floors are using consumer-grade sensors. So I started saying, hey, you know what? There's a consumerization trend going on in IoT in the industry, right? And that was something that just sat in the back of my head, and I was working in IoT, and I moved on. And my wife takes a new job. And she comes back on the first day from her new job. And she brings a laptop. And the laptop was about 8 pounds, 8.5 pounds. For record, that laptop is probably 2.5 pounds. So it was 8.5 pounds. It was huge. It was thick. It was really, really robust, let me put it that way. And she was very dismayed. And she's a millennial. She's, like both of us, are higher end on the millennial scale, but she's a little more lower end than I am. I'm older than her. And she looked at this, and she was just disappointed. I'm like, what is this? And she's like, this is a PC they gave me, and they told me I need this. And I'm like, why did the IT gentleman give you this PC? He said, oh, it's future-proof. It's strong. Future-proof because it's big. It's very high spec. It's strong. It's reliable. And I said, okay. It's got a lot of performance, but I said, what are you going to do with this? She's like, I'm going to do email, PowerPoints, Google Slides. Like, okay. So I said, here's what we're going to do. Assuming you're going to commit to this job for 2 years, she ended up working in that place for 4 years. Let's go get you a better laptop. So I said, go to Costco. You can return it if you want. Get a device, which a laptop, a thin and light. So she went and she found an all-metal Windows laptop, $650. Pentium i3, And she brought it home. She took it to the IT gentleman and she said, can I use this instead, please? And the IT guy was like, wow, the PC I bought was $1,500. This is $650. Yeah, let's do it. She's eternally grateful to me. But that then started bringing back the chain of thought I had with consumerization of IoT. And I started saying, you know what? Millennials, younger generation folks, they are judging the workplace based on their experiences of technology, right? And they're starting to make decisions about where they want to work, where they want to be. And a lot of this trend is going to start changing the way we work. So I wanted to work in the commercial space, and I started doing commercial product management. And this trend is something that really I'm passionate about. So I thought, hey, you know, in the product school, there's a lot of different lectures, a lot of instructors. A lot of the instruction focus on things like general product management concepts, how to read data, how to analyze data. I thought, you know what, let's bring some specific industry subject matter expertise here. You're all the smart people. Let's, you know, see if what I say coincides with what your experience is, and let's discuss some ideas. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about how and why is the workplace changing. I think it'll be good to understand a little bit about what consumerization of the workplace really means. We'll talk about who the stakeholders are and how it impacts them. I think it's really important as product managers and engineers and even marketers to understand who are we going after, who are we solving problems for, what is their makeup, why. So we'll talk a lot about that. We'll talk about opportunities in the space that, at least from my lens as I see it, how can product managers, people building products, how do we take advantage of these opportunities? We'll discuss some considerations that PMs should take into account when they build their products. We'll talk about some approaches. The one thing I want to say is that do not walk out of this meeting with a checklist. Like, this is Sanava's checklist, and I need to go and do every single thing in the checklist, because your product, your project is going to be different. But these are some guidelines that may or may not be applicable. So some of it is an art. So as long as you have some tools in your chest, you have to know which tools to use when. So that's a request I have. What is the consumerization of IT? So I pulled in, there's a lot of different definition on the internet. Like, you can look it up. I mean, there's all sorts of different ideas. But I think here's two real succinct descriptions of what's going on right now. One is by IDG, and they take a very user perspective when they define the consumerization of IT. They say it's the user's experience with the technology as a consumer which impacts their expectations of that technology at work. So what you experience as a consumer changes what you experience as work. Good example is, and this is now kind of ugly because I put a case on it. This is my third phone in the last year. But this is a Samsung Galaxy S10 Plus. I just bought this. I'm used to a certain level of design, a certain level of functionality, infinity bezels. I love this device. I love Samsung. I expect my devices at work to feel the same way. If they break that paradigm, that's not good. So that's the IDG definition. Gartner has another definition, and that is less from a user perspective and more from a technology perspective. And that is the specific impact that consumer-originated technologies can have on enterprises. So what they're saying here is that in the past, enterprise technology used to originate within enterprises or within companies serving enterprises. That is changing. A lot of consumer companies are creating innovation for consumer, but porting that to the enterprise. That is the technology shift. So Gartner approaches a slightly different way, but I think these two definitions capture the essence of what the consumerization of IT is. So what is driving this, right? I think I mentioned a little bit. Let's talk about a little more detail. So it's being driven by a bunch of things. One is a culture and demographic shift, and the other one is a technology shift. The culture shift is that 70% of the workforce will be millennials and Gen Z by 2025. So much more younger people are using technology, and they use technology very differently. Don't make assumptions about what Gen Z and millennials want. I think that is a key thing, and that's something for me. Even I'm on the upper end of what a millennial is, and I'll be honest, like even people 10 years younger than me, use things slightly differently. So it's always good to go get data. So second thing, and I talked about my wife's experience here. 90% of millennials say that a company's tech sophistication impacts their decision to work there, right? So I have this little device. How many of you know what this is? Yes, this is an RSA key, two-factor auth. I had a friend who called me up when his company gave him this. And he said, what is this? What is this? And I said, this is two-factor auth. He's like, no, I get this, but what is this? I'm like, it's a key. He's like, but why do I need this? I'm like, he trades cryptocurrencies. He's used to Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator. He's like, generates the seed generates the code. Why do I need this? And I'm like, well, old school company. So again, this was something that was a negative point against where he works. It's like, this is kind of embarrassing. So keep that in mind when you build products, that technology in your company is important. And as product managers, we should keep that in mind. Third thing is that 77% of employees say they are more productive working remotely. This is a big, big change. Even now, if you work depending on the company culture, some companies have the concept of FaceTime. You need to be in the office, you need to leave after the boss, or you need to be around. That's becoming more and more difficult, right? Most teams are all over the world. I work with people in Japan, Taipei, Seoul, Houston. I mean, it's all over the world. And I remember there was a time when I was actually flying to Tokyo, and Bobby, you were not on that flight, where I had Microsoft Teams, which is a collaboration app. And I was actually about to land, not about to land, maybe 2 hours away, and we were getting ready for some client presentations. And I was using the plane's Wi-Fi to live talk to my colleagues who were in the hotel lobby in Japan to get our presentation tightened up. So this is a very collaborative environment, right? So employees are saying they want to be working remotely. A lot of them will use personal apps and work apps side by side. So they might be watching CNN or Netflix while they work. And that helps them. That's background noise. I do a lot of that. I play music. I listen to all sorts of things while I work, and that helps me focus. Background noise is comforting. So a lot of people want things like mobile connectivity. Again, important to keep in mind when designing products. And then there's and the one more thing I want to mention about location. Office space is shrinking. How many of you who are working have actual physical offices? Show of hands.
Like not a desk, but
no, an office. Okay, that's interesting. No one is raising their hands. I have been fortunate enough to have an office for nearly 15 years. My own office. At one point, it was very nice. It was in Bellevue, Braven, overlooking the lake. However, I've heard that I will be moving to a shared space in the next few months.
oh, sorry.
Yes. So office space is going away. So again, creating that collaborative environment is very important through technology. And I'd be remiss not to mention technology as a driver. These are all wants, right? But you need some technological tailwinds to enable these scenarios. And there are a lot. But I'm going to just call out a few that are easy, that I think are the big ones. Number one is that we are seeing the cost of cellular data connectivity fall every year, year over year. And that's especially true in Asia and in Europe, less so in the US. US is falling, but it's a little more conservative. Prices are still high. What that means is that it has suddenly become a lot more economical to take video conferencing, team calls, share and download big files on your data plan. So this is driving a lot of the collaboration. The other one is a 15% drop in cloud computing power per user year over year. That's pretty consistent. Suddenly it has become very economical for companies to start putting small files, storing your data, storing your images, storing all your assets, the company assets, on the cloud so that people can access it remotely and work in this very flexible manner. The third one is cheaper, slimmer devices. consumerization of IT is great, but if the device is super expensive, IT companies are not going to deploy that. It's possible now. This device, S10 Plus again, and I am not a Samsung employee, has the Qualcomm 855 chip. That chip uses a 7 nanometer architecture, which is a 30% drop in size compared to its predecessor, the 845. So the chip has gotten smaller significantly. The performance of this chip has gone up by 40%. 40%. So there is a lot of technology that enables this. So it's not simply the desire, because if it was the desire, then people in the 60s would have been wanting all of this as well. But there are some confluences. Now, this is by no means exhaustive. There are more factors here, but I thought I'll just list out some of the big ones. So we understand the definition. We understand why the consumerization of the workplace is happening. Let's talk about who is being impacted. And these slides, the last ones are great. It gives you some context. This one tells you as a product manager who to start thinking about. I may be missing people. These are the people that I have worked with over my career. You may have slightly different audiences, maybe very different ones, but it's important to think about that. So here's the core people. Number one, the most neglected customer segment in the enterprise and small business space, the end customer, the employee. It's the final customer of your product. They are the people who will use your product or experience your product. They are the people who are the engines of your organization. However, product designers today do not take into account, for the most part, there are exceptions, the employee. Why? It's because they don't sell to the employee. Do you as an employee decide that you're going to install an app or get it? No. They sell to the IT professional. Employee is the most important person. So we'll talk a lot about that. We'll explore that in more depth. IT professionals, I call them IT pros just to abbreviate them. They have a very, very hard job. They have to manage all these different devices that all of you and millennials, Gen Zs, everyone brings into the enterprise and the small business environment. Before, it was an easy job. No, not easy. I don't want to say that. It was not easy. But it was easier. They used to have 3 or 4 kinds of devices, local, in the same building. IT professional could manage it. If there was an issue, you walk upstairs, go to the room, knock on, schedule an appointment. They'll fix it. That's not possible. We talked about the delocalization of the workplace. IT professionals can't do that anymore. And not only that, they can't even manage 1 or 2 configuration of devices. There is this phenomenon, we call it bring your own device, BYOD. People bringing this into the workplace. And this is one of the nicer ones. Some people bring some really insecure, hard to manage devices, and then they start doing work. So and it's even crazier. That's just devices, right? Let's talk about data. People sometimes copy the data into their own personal stores. So the IT professional has to manage this mixed consumerized environment. They have to secure it. It's a hard job. We have to help them. We'll talk a lot about that. And when I say manage, I'm not talking about devices only. I'm talking about applications. I'm talking about services. So we'll explore that in more detail, but I'll just say this. If you see an IT pro, which you're unlikely to see anymore because of delocalization, give them a hug. Business decision makers, I'm not really going to cover this in much detail. I'm actually not going to talk about it more than beyond this, but IT pros usually have a boss. That's the business decision maker. In a small business, it's going to be the CEO. In a big company, it might be the CTO, CIO. You will do the final decision. They'll make the final decision on the budget. IT pro will make a recommendation to them. Keep in mind the business decision maker, especially when you're building a product, because they'll be in the room at some point, maybe before, if it's a multi-million-dollar deal, they'll be in the room. Talk to them, make eye contact. It's important to get them on board. Another constituency that product managers, I actually never hear them talk about this at all. They don't talk about employees. They usually talk about this. This I've never heard is hardware partners, software partners, channel partners. Hardware partners. If you're an application developer or a service developer, your application or service runs on hardware. It's important to think about how that experience comes together. Talking about, again, the phone. The apps are highly optimized for the phone today. If your phone has a very, very WHD resolution, right? Well, you know what? Your app better take advantage of that. Otherwise, it's going to look really bad. So think about your hardware partners. We'll discuss what that means in a later slide. Engage them early on. Same thing with the software partners. They are usually, and many of us can be software developers or software product managers, build applications. That's core job. Some of us could be working in stores, application stores, to create an infrastructure for applications to be hosted. Other folks, like I used to do, could be working on platforms and standards. These are all important customers, may be important to you depending on what you're doing. But if you're thinking about product management in the consumerization of the IT space, of the workforce, important to think about these people. Channel partners, resellers. Not all companies go directly to the customer. I'll talk about Citrix, for example. Citrix, great product. They sell directly on the website, but Citrix also has distributors who resell their products for them. Distributors are important. They can focus on microsegments. They have existing relationships with customers that the main company may not, and they can provide additional services. They can amplify your product sales. It's important to think about channel partners, resellers, when you build your product. It's been important for me, at least. And then a last group, probably the most important group, internal advocates. These are people within your company who will support and sponsor your efforts to modernize the workplace. I'll talk about why this is important, why this is particularly challenging in the consumerization of IT space. I have seen this happen over and over again. Product managers, really, really smart folks, very talented, great strategy, great execution, great presentation skills, product fails. Why? Couldn't get buy-in, gets lost in the company. So employees and users. Here's some customer needs they have. Number one, actually let's back up. The most important thing as product managers we can do for employees and users is let them achieve more at work without getting in their way. That is the most important thing we can do. To do that, let's talk about some trends. Employees care the most about productivity. You'll hear some people say, well, collaboration is the most important thing. No, collaboration is a means to an end. The most important thing for employees at the workplace is productivity. If you have your vice president ping you on a project that you're working for, let's say you're building some slides and presentations, and the vice president says, you know what, I'm on the road, give me the presentation. You're on the road. You can't access the presentation properly. You're trying to log into your network, it's not really working in the corporate network, the password has changed, all of that. What are you going to do? You're going to take the file, if you can get it, you're going to save it to your email, Hotmail, Gmail, you can email it to your boss. Some of these files are HBI. They're very high business sensitivity information, right? In the political field, we saw that, right? Political candidates, they stored their classified emails in personal email boxes. They knew the rules, but they did it. Why? Because the most important thing was productivity. They were on the go. They need to get things done. So remember, employees, consumers, they will prioritize productivity above everything else. Number two, they will want to collaborate from anywhere. We talked about this, right? Like people, remote, they expect their apps, their services to work on any device that they will have access to, which is running any operating system in different environments. Very important. Third thing, they value consumer-centric design, right? This is about the consumerization of IT. Consumer design principles are very important. So I've got a few examples here. We have an app at Microsoft called the Company Portal. It's an app that is used to secure BYOD, bring your own device. So this device is managed by a company portal. The app company portal is not a choice. I don't get to pick whether I want to install company portal. If I want to use my work mail, which I do, I have to use it. There were a lot of comments in the reviews. One of the comments was interesting. It was, please update the UI to the new Windows 10 design language. So this person who wrote the review is a Windows 10 user. They like Windows 10, probably at home. There is a design language that Microsoft has spent a lot of money and time perfecting for Windows 10. And it's a choice. People at home don't have to buy Windows 10 PCs, but they choose to do that. That user has an expectation that the app that Microsoft is providing looks and feels like that, right? But they didn't have a choice on the app. So again, that's an interesting comment. The other one, Citrix Workspace. The resolution is terrible on high-quality monitors. Now, the app development, maybe this is resolved. These comments may be a year or two old, so take that into account. You know, these are, again, high-resolution devices. This has more resolution than my large-screen monitor, right? The app has to be able to take advantage of that. So consumer-centric design is a whole field. It's very important. It's something that's really important to millennials, Gen Zs. And it's something that we'll talk about a little more in how PMs should take that into account. Business outcomes are pretty simple. I mean, I like to keep it simple. Success here is higher end-user employee satisfaction. When you build your product, poll the employees, talk to the employees. Don't just talk to the IT professional. Understand what do they think of your product. And then productivity. Is your product enabling them to be more productive? There is no one metric for productivity, so I didn't put it here. But there are different ones, right? You all can think of different. For example, in Microsoft, from the work I do, how long does a PC take to boot? Exactly. It's an important metric for us. We care about it deeply. Standby, resume. How long does it take to complete a task? Instrument your application, your service. Look at the telemetry. Review the telemetry. Very important. So these are two. There could be others. But anyway, let's talk about PM considerations. This is the most fun thing because it's actually actionable things that all of us can hopefully take home. Number one is get inspired from consumer design. If you are in the enterprise space or in the small business space, in the business space, and you're doing product development, you better have some examples of consumer designs or consumer designers that really inspire you. There's a reason I'm doing this presentation next to this device. This is a Dyson vacuum. By the way, it's not very clean. It's actually from my home. My wife is like, what are you doing? Why are you loading this? I'm like, because I'm going to talk about it. Peter Gamek. Peter Gamek is the head of design in Dyson. This is, everyone talks about design. People talk of Apple, Steve Jobs, and Mr. Ives. This is different. This vacuum is a masterpiece in design. It looks like something that, you know, a lot of people take for granted, but don't. They're a pioneer. This transparent bowl, they brought this to the market, or they were one of the leading people. When they did that in 1988, people laughed at them. They said, no one wants to see the garbage. It's crazy. Mr. James Dyson, so Sir Dyson, said, no, they want to see it because they have to know when to empty it. Right? You see all these red tabs? The whole vacuum has them. Red tabs. They mark points where you can just disassemble the vacuum and fix the component. If there's a leak, block, just take it out. No screwdrivers needed. Revolutionary. Everything's tabbed and it's marked in red. The original Dyson had it in yellow. So you can quickly disassemble it. You can self-serve. You can fix the issue yourself. The filter. Most vacuum cleaners, even now, when you want to clean the filter, it's a mess. You got to put your dust, at least I got to put my dust mask on because I'm allergic to dust. This thing, super easy to change. You're supposed to clean it every 3 months. I haven't cleaned it in a year. The filter is this clean. Why? Because they use cyclonic technology so that the air spins around the filter. The filter is hardly needed to actually do the filtering. So, great consumer design. Be inspired by consumer design. This can matter. When I was working on PC design for laptops in the workplace, This was my inspiration. Why? IT professionals care about serviceability. They care about repairs, right? If your PC has to be easy to repair, but it also has to be beautiful to look at. Form and function, you need both. Before, it was only about function in the enterprise, SMB. Now we need form. Marry both. There are trade-offs. As product managers, you'll have to navigate those trade-offs. I can't get this to fit. Ah, there it is, snaps. So, trade-offs, PC design. We know that these things, no bezels on the phone, very popular. We love that. We wanted to do that on PCs. And we've had conversations about doing that, but we chose not to do that. We wanted to take the screen, and this is not even the best example, the latest example, but we will make the screen as big, but we still had to put bezels. Why? The infinity displays on phones, very delicate. They keep breaking. If you fall, very difficult. So we had to ruggedize these a little more. So there are trade-offs, right? There's a cost trade-off. Product managers, be ready, understand those trade-offs, be ready to have discussions about them, get data, make those trade-offs. Third one, this one is a little more obvious. Optimize your applications and services to work efficiently across different operating systems, form factors, right? Again, we talked about resolution scaling. Make sure if you're going to build an app or service and you think it needs to work across other people's devices, which I think it does. It's going to have to work with iPhones, Android phones. Commit. If you can't commit, don't do it or stagger out the release. But what I don't recommend is releasing something just to say that you have it running on all the different touch points and it's not really a good experience. Last piece of advice here. I've heard this happen. Most people don't talk to employees, product managers, in the enterprise space. When they do talk to employees, they say, oh yeah, we surveyed employees. We got some feedback. Employees are not one group of people. They're not a monolithic group. Employees comes in all different sorts of segments. You have to understand the segments. Like for my job, we have, for example, power users. These are users who use AutoCAD. They use very demanding applications. They run queries, SQL queries, big ones. Some of them on their machine. They need powerful machines. Very different than a frontline worker, someone in Starbucks, like a barista, who's using their computer to do some basic data entry, or check a recipe, or note something, get some customer feedback. Don't put all employees in one bucket. I have seen this happen way too many times. Well, let's talk about IT professionals. Again, very important. This is a group that people do listen to, but I think there's still a lot of things we can do better. What do IT pros want to do, most importantly? The most important thing for an IT professional is lowering TCO, total cost of ownership, of the entire IT environment. Per user, they want to lower TCO. That is their North Star. And your North Star as a product manager should be to help an IT pro make the connection between the product that you're building for the business and how it impacts their TCO. If you've done that, you've won. If you haven't done that, your job is not complete. Let's talk about their needs. Some of them are pretty obvious. They want to get employees up and running fast. When you turn on your PC, you log in, authenticate into your Azure service, you better get productive quickly. For a big company, there's a lot of resources. Big companies, IT departments have a lot of money. But think about it. Every 10-minute delay, right, to get productive. At Microsoft, we have over 100,000 employees. That is a lot. 10 minutes, that's a lot of cost. Small business, a lot of small businesses, they pay IT by the hour. They don't even have an IT professional, many of them. They have an IT service contracted on a fixed hourly rate. That is a cost adder. They want to get IT employees, their employees up and running fast. They have to secure their assets. We talked about how your files are on your personal G Drive or OneDrive. You have bought personal devices to the workplace. They need to be able to secure all of that, right? And the last thing, they have to be able to make the case to their CIO, CTO, their boss, As a product manager, remember the most important, your client, which is the IT pro and the end customer, the IT pro has to make the case to their boss on why they're going to spend the money on your product and communicate that. And that's something you keep in mind, because the boss usually asks two questions. Number one is, what's the cost? And number two is, has there been a data breach? Or are we safe? That's the only two things they care about. Let's talk about some business metrics to gauge what success is with IT pros. Number one is simple, IT pro satisfaction, just like employee satisfaction. You can measure this. You can do quantitative studies. You can do surveys. You can talk to them. Don't wait, and I see this happen a lot. Don't wait till your product is about to get renewed at the end of the year, or you're about to they're about to drop you before you go and reach out. Regular communication with your customer is important. Get feedback early and get it often without making it a chore. Another one, very obvious, fewer support tickets escalations. If you're building a product, get the number of support tickets escalations from IT that they created to service your product. That number should be dropping over time. Number three, repeat purchases, lower churn. You want to see your customers, IT pros, come back to you again and again, especially in a model today where you are not selling a software and saying bye-bye. This is not Windows 7 where you sold a software and you're gone. You're selling a subscription. You want to see repeat purchases. Number four is something that I have never seen anyone talk about, but I have seen the need for it. You can sell anything if you throw enough money at it, right? You can have your channel partners pump money and incentives into the channel. They'll discount the product. They'll sell it. Fine. You're breaking into a new market. You have some investor cash. You can afford to do it. But you better not be doing that 5 years down the line. That number, that incentive per user needs to be dropping. And that is a metric I don't see enough people tracking. So let's get to the fun part. PM considerations. When you deal with IT pros, what are the things you should think about? Again, there is no one answer for it. It's going to depend on your customer, your product. Here's a few that I thought were valuable. Number one, IT pros are busy. They don't have time to get in your app, learn every nuance about your app, every setting, and how to set it up perfectly to work in their environment. Give you an example, IoT, bringing some lessons from my IoT days. Has anyone here heard about the Mirai botnet attack? So 2016, servers in the bank, France, America, England, all went down. People could not access the internet. Huge amounts of the world, the internet was just not working. What happened? Mirai botnet. IoT devices in corporate environments were there. These devices, small company in some country just building it, not a big team behind it. They plug it into the corporate net. Then, we got a firewall, we're all good. You know what? No. There are some developer ports that the device exposes. Hackers scanned the ports, and then they found the devices. Guess how the devices are configured from the factory? The password, guessed. Or the password is password. They got access to the device. They made the device ping the bank servers. And then they made the device infect the other devices. Brought the whole internet down. This is a serious problem. So, when you build a product, remember, there is no such thing as an insecure or unimportant device from a security perspective. Make sure that your product is secure by default. If you cannot secure it by default, don't let the product be installed or set up completely. Interrupt the process. Huge thing. It'll save you a lot. These are things that can get product managers fired. The other thing that's important is the interaction between security and privacy. There are two different groups of stakeholders. Privacy knows compliance, regulations. They know all of that. They're not usually very technical. Security, very technical folks. Rapid pace of development. Privacy, compliance, data regulations move much more slowly. As a product manager, you have to talk to your privacy folks and your security folks. Why? GDPR. Has anyone here heard about GDPR?
Oh no, global data protection regulation.
Great. GDPR. How is it defined? They use two words here. The technical and organizational measures to protect employees' rights and freedoms. Consumerization of IT. Your employees are bringing their personal data into the workplace. They're taking the workplace data out. GDPR is very particular about how long you can store data and what kind of data you can store. You can't just have a technical IT pro, a security guy or a security lady, come and say, oh, you know what, we'll do all this and we'll secure the environment. That takes care of this piece. Organizational policy. You need your IT person, you need your privacy person, your compliance person, and you need them in a room because they need to talk it out sometimes. Otherwise, you as a product manager will play whack-a-mole. You will talk to the privacy person, they'll show you their compliance, their, privacy doc. You'll read it, you'll be like, okay. Then you'll go talk to the security person, they're like, oh yeah, we secured it, have you? No, get them in a room. Compatibility with existing infrastructure. Please do not sell a cloud-based application to an IT pro whose enterprise is on-prem and they have not moved to the cloud. Don't do it. Don't push people uphill. If they're on-prem, maybe big step, get them in a hybrid environment where they're partly cloud, partly on-prem. So help them make that navigation. One of the very important things for them is that they want whatever application service you build to work with what they have. So don't be so arrogant as to say, you know what, the application I have is awesome. It's great. It really is good. It lowers TCO, but it doesn't work with what they have. No, they're not going to change because of you, and you're going to be unsuccessful. Caution with seismic shifts to pricing models. So I mentioned this. Enterprises, SMBs, they are moving away from the perpetual license model where you buy Windows and you have it for 3-4 years to subscription. They're navigating that change. That is a big change. With the cloud, there's new ways of business models, right? Pay per use, right? You pay for how much cloud resources you consume. That is a very different concept. A lot of companies, if you tell them, hey, you know what, you pay for the, we'll put you on the cloud, you only pay for how much you use, they'll be like, whoa, I used to buy something up front and that was it. I never heard back for 3 years. I don't know, how much is this going to be? They get really scared. Don't shift the needle that fast. If you can't do that, think about how can you make the model something that they can relate to. Maybe instead of saying pay per use, look at something like Verizon in the consumer space. You consume data, you pay per use, but what have they done? They've segmented into buckets, small, medium, large, fixed pricing. You fall in one of the buckets. Do something like that. And then last thing, tell the story. How can your solution lower TCO, total cost of ownership? Make that connection. There are ways we can do that. Happy to talk offline, but it's important to talk in terms of TCO. Last important customer, at least indirect upstream partners. We talked about resellers. We talked about channel partners, hardware partners, software partners. The main thing is that, here's the main thing with all of them. Let's talk about device partner. They want to sell a PC to the customer every 3-4 years. That's what they do. The margin is not there. It's not enough money. The margin in devices are slim. Has anyone here heard of the razor and razor blades model? So what do? You sell the razor for cheap, make the money on the blades. So that's the thing about these partners. If your product needs these partners, and many do, right? You require them to run on a device, or you require a channel like Citrix has their distributors. Make sure they have a story where they can get a share of the pie. So channel partners, they want to sell a managed service. And they want to repeat, let's say support, PC support. I sell the PC and I also sell a support plan with it. That's a subscription I can make a lot of money on as a channel partner. Now what happens? Let's say I am the PC maker or I am the app maker. It doesn't matter. I work with a distributor. And you know what? They work with the customer and there's a support call that comes up. And they say, hey, hello, Microsoft. We're having an issue with the PC. We're not sure what's going on. And the channel partner calls Microsoft up. I'm the product manager. And I say, oh, I don't know. It could be me. It could be Intel. It could be Amazon Workspaces. Don't do that. As a product manager, help them navigate all these different stakeholders if your product works across that. So they don't have to, as a channel partner, do all these different things, right, where people finger point to each other, and it drives up the cost and makes it very difficult. Help them self-serve, so that they are independent. They have what they need. You as a product manager have thought through the dependencies with the hardware partner, with the software partner, with the service partner, and given them the tools they need to be successful. The business outcome that really matters here is that the pie for you as a product manager with a P&L potentially, and your channel partners, your hardware, the pie has grown for everyone. That is success. You need them, they need you, the pie has to grow. You can't keep the pie the same and just distribute margins around. They lose more, you get more. That may work, but it does burn bridges, and it depends on your strategy. So last thing in the slide, thank you for putting up with quite a long presentation. We talked about getting people, corporate allies on board. You can have the best strategy, you can have the best smarts, you can have the best product. If you don't bring your boss, your chain, your advocates along, you don't have advocates, you don't have sponsors, you're not going to go anywhere. And this is an art. This is not a science. Everyone's company is going to be different. Here's some pieces of advice that I thought may be helpful. So find your corporate comfort zone. So I have not met a perfectly balanced company. Some companies are enterprise or business focused completely. Some are completely consumer focused. Some are consumer and business focused, like Microsoft. But within that, every team will have a distinct personality. Most of the members of some teams might be consumer. They may come from a consumer land. In some other teams, they may be enterprise. Understand if you're building a product for the enterprise or SMB, and you're trying to build a consumerized product for that, understand what your team's culture and comfort zone is. If your exec is a consumer exec, don't go and start talking to them in a different language to sell your idea. They will not get it. Understand what do they value, what is their taxonomy, what terms do they use? Do they use things like total cost of ownership? Or do they use things like experience, feel, user design, user satisfaction? Understand these things, speak the same language, tell the story in the same language to win them on board. I made this mistake before. Hopefully you all don't do that. Number three, let key stakeholders take credit. This is another weakness a lot of people have. I've had this. I still am working on it. If I do something really good, and it's very important with consumerization in particular. These are generally good for anything, but this is particularly important. Let other people take credit. Here's why. When you are working with an enterprise or SMB on a product like that, in let's say a consumer-friendly organization, your team is mostly consumer, it's a tough sell. You're telling them to go and take a consumer product, sell it to enterprise. You're making them jump, creating a cultural shift. To bring people on board, they have to feel part of the journey. If you go sell your idea, your product as yours, and you have everything solved, they don't feel invested. So let your executives, let your management team feel like they are part of the solution. Work with them, take the problem 90%, let them weigh in, bring them along. If they take credit for it, who cares? Ultimately, you know what? People will know the good work you do. And I think the consumerization of IT makes this challenge a bigger problem, again, just because no company is perfectly balanced between consumer and enterprise, and stakeholders you meet will usually have an expertise in one or the other, but you as a product manager will have to bring both together. Use props and examples. I used a lot of examples today. I brought this. This was heavy. Bought a vacuum cleaner. Bought my RSA token. Bought my phone, right? I use props. Use that. Demonstrate the value through examples, not just words. It's very difficult for people to follow. Connect product value to TCO. We talked about that. I won't go into that again. We talked about total cost of ownership. Make the connection between your product and how it lowers total cost of ownership. Nothing beats a pilot. When you build a product, it's going to be a journey. Some products take a long, long time to go build. Take your time, do it step by step. Build a pilot. Get some people on board. Get some customers who say, you know what, if you build this, I will buy it. Take that data to your execs. I'm doing that for a product right now that I'm working on. Go build a pilot, because it's easier to sell people when they see and feel some actual progress, bite size, versus they read a big paper with a lot of ideas. Make it a little real for them. But again, one warning with pilots: don't let a pilot stay in a pilot stage for years. Make sure there's some clear exit criteria and next steps articulated. I've seen this happen a lot. Right? People do forever pilots. They move from one pilot to the other. And then you're like, when are you going to ship your product? So create a sense of urgency. No one is going to listen to you if you don't believe it's urgent. Tell them what is going to happen if you don't build this product. If I don't build this product by 6 months, or have a pilot by 3 months, and I have funding, or I have your support, we will lose share to XYZ, and here's how. Make that urgency. Create a sense of urgency. And then last one, win over a powerful exec sponsor. Find who is influential in your organization. Again, these things are not just consumerization of IT. These things are good stuff in general. Find who is an influencer. Who can help you? Are they helpful? Will they be an ally? Go get that person. Get them onboarded. Make them feel part of the journey. And let them advocate for you where you can always advocate for yourself. And I think that will help you ship a successful product.